Hi everyone, and welcome to my Inktober Sketchbook tour for 2019. I'm extremely proud to say that this is my fourth completed Inktober Sketchbook, and I had an amazing time working through this challenge. I dedicated much more time to it this year, and I put myself out of my comfort zone with different drawing ideas and stuff like different angled perspectives on a few of the drawings, which was awesome to try and a great way to learn some new drawing techniques. I love this challenge. I think Inktober is such a great way to learn a lot over a month. In terms of getting out of your comfort zone, but also setting a schedule for yourself and sticking to it over the month. That's a great thing for any artist to practice. And it was just amazing to see all the incredible and inspiring artwork that was being posted using those hashtags every single day. I was making sure to check it out, and it was so inspiring. In terms of the supplies I used for my drawings, for the inking I used Sakura Pigma Micron pens and a Pentel pocket brush pen. Then for the shading and colouring I used Copic markers, and for the highlighting I used a white GellyRoll and a white Uni-Ball pen, and sometimes faded them outwards with a white Faber-Castell pencil. Oh, and this is a Rowney Earthbound sketchbook. I've been really looking forward to making this sketchbook tour video, and I can't wait to show you my drawings, so here we go! On day one, the word prompt was ring, and so I worked on this ringed planet, and it was much more difficult than I imagined trying to get these rings lined up correctly, so they have the right kind of perspective. But hopefully it worked out, and then I added this fantasy landscape with these moons in the sky, some stars shining brightly, having the solar system's star shining from the horizon of this planet and highlighting this edge of this planet. This was a lot of fun, and it made me realise that at some point in the future I would love to try and work on some realistic looking planet drawings. That would be awesome. Then on to day two, the word prompt was mindless. In this case, I decided to try something more abstract with this sci-fi looking character. This was a fun portrait to attempt, and I'm really happy with the result. Then I added some abstract looking patterns in the background with a brush pen. Then I copied that sort of abstract design and added these patterns coming from the character's head with the white ink. I'm very pleased with this. This was something very different for me, and I had a lot of fun with it. Then on day three, the word prompt was bait, and this one was a lot of fun. I really wanted to work on this tree, just sitting in wait for someone to try and pick up these gold coins. So you can see it's kind of hunched over with this posture. It's ready to kind of pounce on someone who tries to pick it up. And you can see I purposely tried to make the roots look like hands, so you can see it's just ready to try and grab someone. This one was a really fun idea, and it's the kind of stuff I love to work on. Freeze was the word prompt on day four, so I attempted this drawing of a frosted rose, and it ended up being much more of a fantasy drawing, with the leaves encased in these blocks of ice, which was a really fun effect to try. I also added these layers of clouds with different levels of shading, and the moon and the snow falling down. But I actually really enjoyed adding the frosted effect to the petals of the rose using the white ink pen. On day 5, the word prompt was build, and I wanted to challenge myself in terms of the inking. Well, the detail I added with the inking. So you can see I added lots of line work to this structure. It's a very lonely looking structure standing on stilts amongst this large body of water. And I've actually wanted to try this idea for a long time, even outside of Inktober, so I'm really glad that I've finally tried it. You can see the moon highlighting this edge of the building as well. And I just love the idea of a story behind this, and who lives here and who's building onto this structure. This little chimney and this flag, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. Then, for day 6, the word was husky, and I decided to go very straightforward, and I worked on a husky. So I used a brush pen mainly, trying to create that realistic looking fur. Then I added a base layer of markers and added highlighting on top. So you can see the bright highlights adding the fur and a kind of a frosted effect because you can see the snow falling down, and also adding the nice bright blue eyes. On day 7, it was my birthday on October 7th, and the word was enchanted. I knew I wanted to try this idea, and I just kept adding to it as I went, with the feather and the string and the cork, with this magic bottle containing these enchanted mushrooms. The real challenge here was trying to get the glass to look correct, with the light shining down, and adding the right kind of highlights and reflections to create that spherical shape. And it's just, I like the idea of there being a story behind this one as well. Maybe it's sitting on a witch or a wizard's shelf, and just you'd wonder what it's for. Then for day 8, the word was frail, and I felt like trying this drawing of a butterfly, where it's obviously had a difficult time with its wings getting damaged, with all these thorns in the background. I loved adding the pattern to its wings, and it was a real challenge working on this with ink, adding the bright highlights along the top edges with the light shining down and just highlighting all these parts. Day 9, the word was swing, and I really struggled with this one, but in the end I decided to attempt another tree, like I did on day 3 for bait, so having the leaves in the foreground and the background, having the detailed twisting tree all the way towards the foreground with its roots, having the rope swing hanging from this branch, adding a really dark background with brush pens, and then having this bright moon shining through and highlighting the edges. I love working on stuff like this, where I add all the dark shading first and then add the highlights on top. It's so much fun. On day 10, the word prompt was pattern, and I really wanted to draw a turtle. I can't remember if I've ever worked on a turtle before. I don't think so, which is crazy because turtles are awesome, and I would really love to attempt a realistic drawing of a turtle sometime. I've made sure to note that down for a future project. In this case, I mainly used the white ink pen to add that pattern, and then I left it on a flat background so the turtle really stands out, and then I surrounded it with lots of bubbles. And then on to day 11, and the word was snow. I was really excited about working on this one. I love snow, and I had this image in my head that I wanted to try and create, and I'm really happy to say that I think I've managed to create it, which is such a nice feeling. So I wanted it to be a snowy landscape, just layered with snow, so having rocks standing out and some cliff faces visible, and then you can see the snow hanging over the edge of each of them. I wanted to focus the highlighting towards the centre, so you can see the light shining down, and where the light's touching, it's highlighting the snow. And then I wanted the most prominent feature to be this tree at the centre, which I created with a brush pen, just with a loose grip, and just trying to create realistic looking branches. And then on top of that, I added more snow with the white ink pen. And so having this bright centre, and then fading the details outwards, and also adding more shading around the outside edges, just really helping to bring the attention towards the centre. And I'm so happy with this one. I think it's definitely one of my favourites of the month. Dragon was the word prompt on day 12, which is so awesome. As some of you might know, I absolutely love drawing dragons, and I've drawn loads of them over the past few years. So seeing it on the word prompt list before the start of the month, I was so excited to finally work on an Inktober style dragon in the style that I often like to draw the dragons. So in this case it's a peaceful one, and it's interacting with this red-caped character, who I also love to add to a lot of my drawings. And they're meeting in this massive forest with this huge tree in the foreground. The red-caped character is standing on this massive tree root, and they're just separated by these layers of mist. The word prompt on day 13 was ash, and I really struggled on this day. It took me ages to think of an idea, and in the end I decided to draw this volcano erupting and spewing this massive cloud of ash into the sky, and you can see the ash is raining down in the foreground. I added a moon in the sky, highlighting this part of the volcano and the ash cloud. Then this part of the ash cloud is much darker, lots of shading here. I tried to create a splotchy effect by holding the markers to the paper for longer, and I was really pleased with this. It's something that I might try again sometime. Then I separated the foreground and the background layers with another layer of ash cloud. And this was really fun. It just took me a long time to think of the idea. Then on to day 14, and the word prompt was overgrown. And this one, I struggled again. It was 2 days of struggle. In the end, I felt like trying some ruins, being overtaken with lots of just vines and plants, just nature taking back. You know, that idea that if given enough time, nature will just take over again. That's the idea I went with. Just you can see all these layers of vines and some plants in the foreground. And I liked the idea of kind of separating this really shaded area with all the colour in the background and the light shining down, highlighting the bright colours of this flower. It was really fun again. It took me a long time again to get that idea down. On to day 15, where the word prompt was legend. And I was slightly inspired by Excalibur in terms of the idea behind this and the sword design. But I really wanted to add an interesting environment around it where the sword is standing in water. I wanted trees in the background that are similar to the tree designs that I've worked on previously, with the leaves in the foreground and the background, adding large shadows underneath them that help to make the sword stand out with its highlights. I wanted mossy rocks standing in the water and some lily pads and a water lily. I added lots of hints of colour to this and added some light shining down that really made the sword and the water lily stand out. I really loved working on this. It's another one of my favourites of the month. Then on to day 16, and the word prompt was wild. Inspired by a trip I took across America in 2015. My amazing friend Al took me on a road trip, and we saw places like Utah with Monument Valley that inspired me to work on this with these rock formations in the desert, adding layers of shading with dead trees and some cacti, rocks and cracked desert ground, a big moon and stars in the sky, some birds flying past. Then on to day 17, where the word prompt was ornament. And I realised, October is the spookiest month of the year, and by this point I hadn't worked on anything particularly spooky, so that was my goal with this drawing. I don't really know what it is. I think it's some kind of haunted ornament hanging up with this vampire skull, these feathers, the red beads hanging on these chains, and the chains I created with the white ink pen. It took a long time to try and add each individual part. And then this crystal ball at the bottom as well. And I tried to make it as symmetrical as possible. And then on to day 18, and the word prompt was misfit. I loved working on this. This was really fun. I was doing a bit of research beforehand. I knew I wanted to work on this idea, but I didn't know what kind of bird to add. So looking online, I found this beautiful bird called the lilac-breasted roller, and it has so many beautiful colours that I really wanted to add to this drawing. And he's kind of the misfit amongst this group with 3 other grey birds, some autumn leaves, and adding some colour to them as well. And I'm very pleased with this one, another one of my favourites of the month. Sling was the word prompt on day 19, and I wanted to create a story in this one. Well, I wanted to continue the red-caped character story, and they've brought an army with them this time, and they're slinging rocks with these catapults they made out of trees. You can see the tree roots, and they're slinging the rocks at this dragon. It must be an enemy dragon that's flying past, with the moon shining down and highlighting the top part of it. I also added the clouds in the sky with different levels of shading to try and create that illusion of distance, helping to create a 3D effect. So you can see another catapult there with more of the army. It was really fun to try this, and just continuing the red-caped character story, which I continue on into the next one for day 20, which was Tread. And initially I was thinking of just trying like tire tracks or something like that, but once I started thinking about this red-caped character story, I just wanted to try more things. I would love to try and develop their story in a more complete way someday. So you can see they're walking through the snow, treading through the snow, leaving these footprints all the way up to where they're standing there. And I also took inspiration from the snow drawing that I worked on previously. You can see with the cliff faces and the rocks with the snow hanging over them, the trees in the distance, and the highlighting, focusing where the character is standing and focusing your attention to that part of the drawing. You can see the snow falling as well. I loved working on this, and I'm really enjoying thinking about this character's story. On the 21st day, the word prompt was treasure, and I tried to create something with a bit of a story again. So you can see this skull wearing a crown with this massive gemstone. On the ground they've got more gold coins and more gemstones, even a diamond there. I added so much ink with brush pens in the background that it's kind of warped the page a bit. I had to keep kind of stretching it out a bit. You can see the light shining down and reflecting off the crown and off the diamond. It was really fun to create this. The story, I don't really know. Maybe royalty passed away with their treasure, or maybe this is a treasure hunter that got trapped or something. I like the idea of adding some stories to some of my drawings, and I've been doing that a lot more in this sketchbook, which has been so fun. Then on to day 22, where the word prompt was ghost. So a pretty self-explanatory word, but I really struggled to think of a design for this one. In the end, I decided on something similar to the ornament drawing I worked on, where it had that first spooky drawing with the feathers and the chains. I also added these folding robes that get closer to the foreground, as if it's trying to grab you. I also added light shining down and highlighting these top edges, and a spooky skull in the darkness underneath the hood. And I tried to give it a bit of a symmetrical effect again, like the ornament drawing. And then on to day 23, and the word was ancient. This one I really wanted to challenge myself with creating some 3D looking steps up to an ancient looking monument or ancient temple that the red-caped character is visiting, so following on with their story. I wanted to make sure the steps really stood out with highlighting, so I added lots of shading in the background and around the outside edges, and then I highlighted the edges of each step to try and create a 3D effect. I also added patches of colour to the mossy rocks and up here, and these lily pads and the water lily, but I really wanted the red-caped character with their red cape to stand out the most. Also added some light shining down, or it could be rain, depending. But just continuing on with their story, and I think this is another one of my favourites. Dizzy was the word prompt on day 24, and I tried to create this perspective of looking up at the moon, and the clouds are spiralling in towards it, with some birds spiralling as well. And it was really fun to try and create this effect. I started with Cool Grey 1 and 3 Copic markers, adding the spiraling clouds here, and then as I spiraled outwards I started using Cool Grey 5 and eventually Cool Grey 7 for the darkest shading. I also overlapped the clouds in some areas to try and create a 3D effect, and to help that effect even more I made sure to use the white ink pen to add highlights on top, and this was really fun. I'm very happy with it. Then on to day 25, and the word prompt was tasty. And I had to try and draw a cat at some point during the month. I'm so happy with this one. It's staring at this fish in its bowl. The challenge again was trying to create that glass effect, adding the highlights to create the reflections and the light and colour refractions on the ground below. Also adding some nice bright colouring to the cat's eyes. This one I'm very pleased with. So, day 26, the word was dark. And this one was much more experimental, and I really didn't know if it was going to work out or not. I started with light shading in the background, just adding layers of trees, and then just continuing to add darker and darker layers as I got closer to the foreground, which took a long time. And then eventually I added the trees closest to the foreground with the Pentel brush pen. Then I added individual highlights to each of the trees going into the distance. Then I added more markers on top to add even more layers of shading. And then I started adding some environmental effects with the white ink pen and some stars in the sky. I ended up being really happy with this, and I'm glad I challenged myself like that. It was good to... I feel like I learnt some new stuff during this drawing. Moving on to day 27, and the word was coat. So, following on with the red-caped character's story, And you can see they've got the red cape and a red scarf this time with the thick coat during the snow. I wanted to work on another snow scene using that same method with the snow hanging over the cliff faces and the rocks. And if you might notice, they're carrying the same sword that was featured in day 15 for the word legend. The moon is shining across and highlighting areas. This was another really fun one, and I'm getting really into the idea of this character having a story. On day 28, the word was ride, and I knew I wanted to work on this idea even before the month started. I saw the word prompt list, and I knew that this was something that I wanted to attempt. So kind of inspired by a hot air balloon, but also turning it into an airship with this boat structure, this sail and these directional controls with lots of rope hanging down. And if you look here, there's the red-caped character again, continuing their story. And I'm really happy with this one because I wanted to actually challenge myself with it, and I'm glad I did. On to day 29, where the word prompt was injured. And here's the red-caped character again. I don't know if you can tell, but by the end of this sketchbook, I was really getting into the idea of the story behind this character, so they're featured in a lot of the drawings. This one, sadly, he's been injured with 3 arrows stuck in him. He's staring down at this sword in the foreground. The moon is shining down and highlighting areas. We've got the clouds with different levels of shading to give that sense of distance. And I'm really happy with the effect I gave down here by adding the marker, kind of separating the foreground and him with this layer of mist. And overall, I'm really happy with this one. They're trying something different, and I think it worked out. And it was nice to work on another drawing with this character. On the 30th day, the word was catch, and I decided to challenge myself with something completely different. I wanted to see if I could work on the details required for a Venus flytrap. So you can see the flies going past in the distance, and it's just waiting for them with its flower. There's rain clouds, and it's raining. It's casting a shadow into the foreground. And the biggest challenge here was trying to get the fine details down. I mainly used the white ink pen to add lots of little bits of line work. Then on to day 31, the final day for Halloween, the word was ripe. And I worked on this pumpkin. It's in a pumpkin field. You can see the fence post in the distance, and I purposely worked on everything with grey ink and made the pumpkin stand out with some bright orange ink with the Copic markers. The moon shining down and highlighting it, and that's it. That's the final drawing in the sketchbook. I had an awesome time with Inktober this year, and by the end of the month I felt much more confident with inking with the fine liners and the brush pen. And I also felt more confident with markers, especially when adding large areas of shading and keeping those layers smooth. Inktober was actually my main focus through October this year, and I feel like prioritising this project in this way helps me a lot, and I'm proud of myself for completing this sketchbook, and I really hope you enjoyed watching me flip through it. Let me know if you took part in Inktober or any other variations of it, and how did it go for you? Did you have any art goals for the month? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. And also let me know what you thought of my sketchbook, and also if you have any suggestions for future art projects or challenges I should try. I would love to know. If you'd like to see more art videos, then feel free to subscribe to my channel, and any thumbs up or shares on this video are hugely appreciated. If you want to follow and support my progress, then be sure to check out the links in the description for my Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and Patreon. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for the support. I really hope you enjoyed this sketchbook tour, and I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you all soon.